The fluorescent lights of Rosie's diner buzzed with their familiar electric hum, casting everything in that particular shade of yellow that made even fresh coffee look tired. I'd been staring at those same lights for the past 6 hours, watching them flicker in rhythm with my increasingly unsteady heartbeat as I moved between tables with a smile I'd perfected over 3 years of waitressing. My feet ached in the cheap sneakers I couldn't afford to replace, the left one pressing against the bruise that wrapped around my ankle like a shackle. Each step sent small sparks of pain up my calf, but I learned to walk through it, to move with the careful precision of someone navigating a minefield of her own body. The Tuesday evening rush at Rosie's was winding down, leaving scattered customers nursing coffee and pie while the Chicago winter pressed against the windows. Frost crept across the glass in delicate patterns that would have been beautiful if I'd had the energy to notice them. Instead, I focused on the mechanics of survival: smile, take orders, deliver food, collect tips, repeat. Don't think about the rent that's overdue or the purple handprints circling my upper arms. Don't think about Marcus waiting at home with whatever mood 3 beers and his latest job rejection had created. "Sweetie, you okay?" Rosie herself appeared at my elbow, her weathered face creased with concern. She was 63, had owned this diner for 40 years, and possessed the uncanny ability to read her waitresses the way some people read newspapers. "You look pale. Paler than usual, I mean." "I'm fine," I said automatically, the lie so practiced it barely registered as dishonest anymore. "Just tired. Late night." Her eyes, sharp and knowing behind cat eyeglasses that had been out of style since 1985, tracked across my face with uncomfortable precision. I'd covered the worst of the bruising on my left cheekbone with makeup borrowed from the dollar store, but the split in my lower lip where Marcus's ring had caught me was harder to disguise. "That boyfriend of yours treating you right?" Rosie asked, her tone suggesting she already knew the answer. "He's fine. We're fine." I picked up the coffee pot from the warmer, needing something to do with my hands. "Everything's fine." Uh-huh. Rosie didn't believe me. I could tell by the way her mouth compressed into a tight line, but she'd learned over the months not to push. I'd perfected the art of deflection, of changing subjects, of simply walking away from conversations that got too close to truth. "Well, you let me know if you need anything. And I mean anything, Maya." I nodded, grateful for her concern even as I had no intention of accepting help. What could she do anyway? Marcus was charming when he needed to be, had talked his way out of situations that should have ended with police intervention, and I had nowhere else to go. No family left after my parents died in that car accident 5 years ago. No savings, account that Marcus hadn't already drained for his investments that never materialized. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. The bell above the diner's entrance chimed, announcing new arrivals. I glanced up automatically, my waitress instincts cataloging the group even as exhaustion made my vision swim slightly. 4 men, all wearing suits that probably cost more than I made in 6 months. The kind of customers who didn't usually wander into Rosie's, which catered primarily to truckers, night shift workers, and people who appreciated that our coffee was strong and our portions generous. But it was the man in the center who made something in my chest tighten with instinctive awareness. He moved with a kind of controlled grace that suggested power held carefully in check, his dark hair perfectly styled, his overcoat casually expensive. Even from across the diner, I could feel the weight of his presence, the way the space seemed to reorganize itself around him. He was perhaps 35, devastatingly handsome in a way that felt almost dangerous, with sharp cheekbones and a jaw that could have been carved from marble. But it was his eyes that caught me, dark, assessing, missing nothing as they swept across the diner with professional thoroughness. "Maya, those are your tables," Rosie murmured, appearing beside me again. Her voice carried a note I couldn't quite identify. Warning, maybe, or respect. "The tall one in the center, that's Dante Moretti. He owns half the restaurants in this neighborhood. Other half too, if the rumors are true." My stomach clenched. I'd heard the name, of course. Everyone who worked in Chicago's service industry knew about the Moretti family. They controlled everything from supply chains to real estate, operated with the kind of efficiency that made people whisper about organized crime while being careful never to say it too loudly. "I'll take care of them," I said, straightening my apron and pasting on my professional smile despite the way my hands had started trembling. I couldn't afford to mess up an order for someone like Dante Moretti. Couldn't afford to give Rosie any reason to cut my already reduced hours. I approached their table with the coffee pot, grateful that my voice remained steady even as my legs felt increasingly unsteady. "Good evening, gentlemen. Can I start you off with coffee?" "Please," Dante Moretti said, and his voice was exactly what I'd expected. Smooth, controlled, carrying the faintest trace of an Italian accent that suggested roots carefully maintained. His eyes lifted to my face, and I felt the assessment like a physical touch. "You look familiar. Have we met before?" "I don't think so," I said, pouring coffee with hands that had learned to hide their shaking through years of practice. "I've worked here for 3 years, though. Maybe you've been in before." "Maybe." But something in his tone suggested he didn't think so, that he would have remembered me if we'd crossed paths previously. I took their orders, steaks and sides, the kind of meal that suggested they weren't worried about the bill, and retreated to the kitchen with relief flooding through me. My reflection in the stainless steel of the order window showed a woman I barely recognized anymore. 26 years old, but looking older, my blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail that emphasized hollow cheeks and shadows under gray eyes that had lost their brightness somewhere in the past 2 years. "You're shaking," Rosa, the cook, observed as she plated the first order. She was Rosie's sister, had the same sharp eyes and kind heart. "When's the last time you ate something?" I couldn't remember. Marcus had been in a mood this morning, had thrown my breakfast against the wall when I'd suggested he might want to look at the job listings I'd printed out for him. The eggs had slid down the faded wallpaper while he'd explained, with his hands around my throat, that I needed to stop nagging him about employment when he was clearly going through a difficult time. "I had lunch," I lied, the words automatic. Rosa made a sound that suggested disbelief, but slid an extra plate of fries toward me. "Eat these. Customer sent them back. Said they were too crispy. Nothing wrong with them, really, but policy says we can't reserve them." I ate them standing at the prep station, each bite mechanical, barely tasting the salt and grease. My stomach cramped around the food, unused to being filled. When had I started existing like this? I wondered distantly. When had survival become such a minute-by-minute calculation? The evening continued its slow wind-down. Dante Moretti and his associates ate with the kind of conversation that suggested business being conducted, though I was careful not to listen too closely. People like that valued discretion, and I needed this job too desperately to risk appearing nosy. I was refilling their water glasses when the diner's door opened again, and my entire body went cold with recognition. Marcus stood in the entrance, his jaw tight with a particular expression that meant he'd been drinking and thinking, and that combination never ended well for me. "Maya," he called across the diner, his voice too loud, attracting attention I desperately didn't want. "We need to talk. Now." "I'm working," I said, keeping my voice low and hoping he'd take the hint. "I'll be home in 2 hours. I said now." He crossed the space between us with aggressive purpose, his hand closing around my wrist hard enough to make old bruises flare with fresh pain. "You think you can just ignore my calls? Make me look like an idiot?" I left my phone in my locker precisely because his calls had become increasingly threatening throughout the day, each voicemail escalating in anger, but explaining that would only make things worse, would give him ammunition for later when we were alone, and his fists could punctuate his sense of disrespect. "Sir, you need to leave." Rosie's voice cut through the tension, sharp with authority despite her small frame. "Maya's working. You can talk to her when her shift ends." "Mind your own business, old woman," Marcus snapped, his grip on my wrist tightening until I felt bones grinding together. "This is between me and my girlfriend." I saw Dante Moretti stand in my peripheral vision, saw his 3 associates shift with the coordinated precision of men trained for violence. But I was focused on Marcus, on the calculation happening behind his bloodshot eyes, trying to determine whether the humiliation of backing down would be worth avoiding whatever consequences these well-dressed men might represent. "Let her go." Dante's voice cut through the diner's stunned silence, quiet but carrying absolute authority. "Now." Marcus's hand tightened reflexively, his face flushing with alcohol and anger. "Who the hell are you to tell me—" "Someone who doesn't appreciate having his dinner interrupted by domestic disputes," Dante said, moving closer with that same controlled grace I'd noticed earlier. Up close, he was even more imposing, several inches taller than Marcus's average height, his presence somehow filling the space between them. "The lady is working. You're disrupting her employment. I suggest you leave and have this conversation somewhere more appropriate." This is none of your business, Marcus growled, but I felt his grip loosening slightly, his survival instincts recognizing danger even through his drunken bravado. You made it my business when you brought it into this establishment. Dante's hand moved, fast as a snake strike, gripping Marcus's wrist and applying pressure that made my boyfriend yelp and release me. Now, I'll say it one more time. Leave, or I'll have my associates escort you out in a manner you won't enjoy. The two men who'd been sitting at Dante's table had stood as well, flanking their boss with the casual menace of people who'd done this before. Marcus looked between them, his face cycling through anger and fear and calculation. Finally, his gaze landed on me. This isn't over, he said, the promise hanging between us like a blade. You and me, we're gonna talk when you get home. And you better have a good explanation for embarrassing me like this. He left, the door slamming behind him hard enough to rattle the windows. The diner's other customers, who'd been watching the confrontation with barely concealed interest, slowly returned to their meals and conversations. But I remained frozen, my wrist throbbing where Marcus had gripped it, my mind already racing through what awaited me at home. Thank you, I managed to say to Dante, though the words felt inadequate. I'm sorry about the disruption. Let me get you fresh coffee, on the house. Sit down, he said, gesturing to the empty chair at his table. Not a request, really, but not quite a command either. Something in between that suggested he was accustomed to being obeyed but willing to be polite about it. I can't. I'm working. My professional smile felt like it might crack my face. But thank you again for intervening. That was very kind. Sit, Rosie said, appearing with a glass of water and setting it in front of the empty chair. You're pale as a ghost, Maya. Take 5 minutes. I sat, primarily because my legs felt increasingly unreliable, like they might give out without warning. The water glass trembled slightly when I picked it up, and I saw Dante notice the movement, saw his gaze track to my wrist where red marks were already darkening into bruises shaped distinctly like fingers. How long? He asked quietly, his associates having retreated to give us the illusion of privacy, though I knew they were listening. I don't know what you mean, I said automatically. How long has he been hitting you? Dante's voice remained conversational, but something cold had entered his dark eyes. Because those bruises on your wrist are fresh, but the ones I can see on your arm beneath your sleeve are older. Different stages of healing. That suggests a pattern, not an isolated incident. Heat crept up my neck, shame and fear tangling together. It's complicated. It's not complicated, he said, echoing words I'd heard in my own head 1,000 times but had never found the courage to speak aloud. He hurts you. That's not complicated. That's criminal. You don't understand, I began, but he held up a hand, stopping me. I understand perfectly. You think you have nowhere else to go. No resources to leave. No one who would believe you or help you. His gaze held mine with uncomfortable intensity. You think if you're just better, if you just don't make him angry, if you just try harder, he'll stop. But he won't stop, Maya. Men like that don't stop until someone makes them stop. The accuracy of his assessment made my throat tighten with unshed tears. How could a stranger see so clearly what I'd been hiding from everyone, including myself, for 2 years? I should get back to work, I said, standing too quickly. The room tilted, my vision graying at the edges as exhaustion and stress, and the lack of proper meals for 3 days caught up with me all at once. I felt myself falling, felt my knees giving out, and then there were hands catching me, strong and surprisingly gentle, lowering me back into the chair rather than letting me collapse onto the diner's worn linoleum. When's the last time you ate? Dante asked, his hand still supporting my elbow, his other hand moving to my forehead to check for fever. And don't lie to me. I can see your ribs through your uniform. The fries, I whispered. Earlier, Rosa gave me fries. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Before that? Yesterday. I had toast yesterday morning. The admission came easier than it should have, my defenses crumbling under the weight of his attention, his obvious concern. Marcus had been on a bender, had screamed about money being wasted on food I didn't deserve, had locked the kitchen cabinets and taken the key with him when he'd left for the bar. Dante said something in Italian, rapid and harsh, that I suspected were curse words. Then he was pulling out his phone, making a call in that same language before switching back to English. Rosa, I need a full meal. Soup, protein, carbohydrates. Whatever you have that's gentle on an empty stomach." "I can't accept that," I protested weakly, even as my stomach cramped with desperate hunger. "I can't pay for—" "You're not paying. I am." He settled back in his chair, his gaze never leaving my face. "Consider it payment for excellent service. You've been taking care of this table all evening despite clearly not feeling well. The least I can do is ensure you're fed." Rosa appeared with a bowl of chicken noodle soup and fresh bread, setting it in front of me with the same stern expression she'd worn when I'd tried to refuse the fries. "Eat," she commanded. "Rosie's orders, and mine." I ate slowly, each spoonful feeling like both relief and shame. Dante's associates had returned to their table, having finished their meal and settled their bill with a tip that made Rosie's eyes widen when she collected the check. But Dante himself remained, watching me eat with the same careful attention he'd given his steak earlier. "What's your last name?" he asked when I'd finished half the soup, my stomach protesting that it couldn't hold more despite my brain screaming that I needed to eat everything available. "Collins. Maya Collins." I set down the spoon carefully. "Why?" "Because I'm going to remember it," he said simply. "And when you're ready, not if, but when, you're going to call me, and I'm going to help you leave him." He produced a business card from his wallet, heavy card stock with minimal information. A name, a phone number, nothing else. "This number reaches me directly. Not an assistant, not a secretary. Me. You call it day or night, and I will answer." "I don't understand," I said, staring at the card. "Why would you help me? You don't even know me." Something shifted in his expression, a crack in his controlled facade revealing genuine emotion beneath. "My mother was killed by a man who claimed to love her," he said quietly. "She never asked for help. Never told anyone how bad it had gotten until it was too late. I was 17 when I found her body." He paused, his jaw working. "I can't save her, but I can make sure other women don't end up the same way." The confession hung between us, raw and honest. I wanted to tell him I wasn't like his mother, that I would leave before things got that bad, that I had everything under control, but the lies wouldn't come, not when he was looking at me with such clear-eyed understanding of exactly how trapped I felt. "I should finish my shift," I said instead, tucking his card into my apron pocket, where Marcus wouldn't find it. "You should go home," Dante countered. "You nearly collapsed. You're in no condition to work." "I need the money," I admitted. "Every shift counts. I'm already behind on rent, and if I lose more hours—" I stopped, realizing I was revealing too much, exposing vulnerabilities I couldn't afford to show. Dante pulled out his wallet again, extracting several bills and setting them on the table. "This is for tonight's service. Consider it a private tip, not connected to the meal I already paid for. Take it, go home. Not to him, somewhere else. And rest." It was too much money. Far too much. Enough to cover a cheap motel room for several nights. Enough to buy food and maybe some supplies. Enough to represent possibility I'd stopped believing in. "I can't accept this," I said, even as my fingers itched to take it, to accept the lifeline he was offering. "You can, and you will." He stood, his tall frame casting a shadow across the table, "because if you go home to him tonight, after he's been drinking and stewing in his humiliation, he's going to hurt you worse than he has before. You know it, and I know it." His hand moved, gently touching my bruised wrist. "Take the money, Maya Collins. Buy yourself one night of safety. That's all I'm asking." One night. The concept felt simultaneously impossible and desperately necessary. I took the money with shaking hands, folding it quickly before I could change my mind. "Thank you," I whispered. "Don't thank me yet," Dante said, his dark eyes holding mine with uncomfortable intensity. "Thank me when you call that number, and let me help you leave him permanently." He left then, his associates following in his wake, leaving me sitting in Rosie's diner with a pocket full of money, a business card that felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds, and the first genuine spark of hope I'd felt in 2 years. Rosie appeared at my elbow, her weathered hand squeezing my shoulder gently. "That man just gave you a gift, sweetie. Don't waste it. Go somewhere safe tonight. We'll cover your tables." I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. I collected my coat and purse from the back room, changed out of my uniform, and stepped into the November night with no clear destination in mind. The motel 3 blocks away had a sign advertising rooms for $40 a night, weekly rates available. As I walked toward it, Chicago's cold wind cutting through my inadequate jacket, I touched the business card in my pocket like a talisman. Dante Moretti had seen what I'd been hiding, had offered help without demanding anything in return, had given me resources to escape for one night to breathe without fear, one night to sleep without listening for footsteps, one night to remember what it felt like to be Maya Collins instead of Marcus's punching bag. I checked into the motel using a fake name, paid cash, and locked the door behind me with shaking hands. The room was small, worn, nothing special. But it was mine for tonight, and Marcus didn't know where I was. For the first time in 2 years, I was safe. I fell asleep on top of the covers, still wearing my clothes, clutching my phone with Dante Moretti's business card propped against the lamp where I could see it. Tomorrow, I'd have to make decisions, whether to go home, whether to call that number, whether to keep running or finally stop and fight back. But tonight, I was safe. I woke to sunlight filtering through thin motel curtains and 3 seconds of disorientation before memory crashed back. The diner, Marcus's rage, Dante Moretti's dark eyes seeing everything I'd tried to hide, the money that had bought me this small room and one night of peace. My phone, still clutched in my hand, showed 17 missed calls from Marcus and twice as many text messages. I scrolled through them with a detached fascination of someone reading about a stranger's life. The progression was predictable: anger, accusations, threats, then the shift to apologies and promises. "Baby, I'm sorry. I was drunk. You know I didn't mean it. Come home. We'll talk. I'll be better. I swear I'll be better this time." The final message, sent at 4 a.m, was different. "You've got until tonight to come home. After that, I'm changing the locks. All your stuff goes in the dumpster. Your choice." It should have terrified me. The thought of losing what little I owned, of being locked out of the only home I had. Instead, I felt a strange calm settle over me. Maybe this was what rock bottom felt like. When you'd fallen so far that the only direction left was up, and the fear that had paralyzed you for so long finally transformed into something else. Determination, maybe, or just exhaustion so profound that even terror couldn't penetrate it anymore. I showered in the motel's tiny bathroom, using the miniature soap and shampoo, watching water circle the drain while I tried to catalog my options. I had maybe $200 left from what Dante had given me, plus the 40 in tips I'd earned last night. Enough for another few days in this motel if I was careful. Not enough for first and last month's rent anywhere. Not enough to truly start over. My clothes from yesterday smelled like grease and coffee, but they were all I had. I dressed carefully, wincing as fabric brushed against bruises, and studied my reflection in the spotted mirror. The woman looking back was a ghost. Hollow cheeks, shadows under her eyes, a split lip that was healing badly, fingerprint bruises darkening her wrist and disappearing beneath her sleeve. "When you're ready," Dante had said. Not if, but when. I pulled his business card from my pocket, the heavy cardstock already worn from how many times I'd touched it during the night. Just a name and a number, no indication of what calling it might unleash. But he'd said he understood, said his mother had been trapped the same way I was trapped, said he would help. Before I could talk myself out of it, I dialed. He answered on the second ring, his voice alert despite the early hour. "Maya." Not a question. He'd known it would be me, or perhaps he'd programmed my number into his phone after seeing it on the diner's caller ID when Rosie had called him back about something. The certainty in his voice made something in my chest tighten. "I don't know why I'm calling," I admitted, the words tumbling out in a rush. I can't go back there. Marcus said he's changing the locks, and I should be upset about that, should be worried about my things, but all I feel is relief. Is that crazy? Am I crazy for being relieved that he's locking me out? "No," Dante said, his voice carrying absolute certainty. "You're not crazy. You're finally choosing yourself over him, and that's the sanest decision you've made in a long time." A pause, then, "Where are you?" "The Economy Inn on Ashland, room 237. I shouldn't have told him, shouldn't have given a near stranger my location this readily, but something in his voice, in the way he'd looked at me last night, made me want to trust him. "Stay there. I'm sending someone to bring you somewhere safer. His name is Vincent. He's my head of security, completely trustworthy. He'll be there in 20 minutes. Dante, I can't, I began, but he interrupted gently. You can, and you will. We'll discuss the details when you're somewhere you're not paying by the hour to feel safe. His tone softened slightly. I meant what I said last night, Maya. I'm going to help you, but I need you to let me. The line went dead before I could respond. I stood in that motel room, phone still pressed to my ear, trying to understand what I just set in motion. Dante Moretti wasn't just offering help. He was taking control of the situation with the same decisive authority he'd shown in the diner. It should have frightened me, this rapid intervention by a man whose reputation was built on power and intimidation. Instead, I felt something dangerously close to hope. Vincent arrived exactly 20 minutes later, a man in his 40s with military bearing and kind eyes, wearing a suit that suggested professional security rather than casual muscle. He introduced himself politely, helped me gather my minimal belongings, and escorted me to a black SUV that probably cost more than I'd earn in 5 years of waitressing. Mr. Moretti has arranged accommodations for you, Vincent explained as we navigated through morning traffic. Secure location, fully furnished, everything you'll need for the immediate future. He'll meet you there this afternoon to discuss long-term arrangements. What kind of arrangements? I asked, suddenly nervous about what accepting Dante's help might actually entail. Vincent's expression remained professionally neutral. That's between you and Mr. Moretti, ma'am. My job is just to ensure you arrive safely. We drove for perhaps 30 minutes, leaving my familiar neighborhood behind for areas of Chicago I'd only seen in magazines. Tree-lined streets with historic brownstones, sidewalks that looked recently power-washed, the kind of wealth that announced itself through impeccable maintenance rather than ostentation. Vincent pulled up in front of an elegant 3-story building, its facade all brick and wrought iron, window boxes that would probably hold flowers in spring. He used a keycard to access the lobby, marble floors, tasteful lighting, a security desk manned by someone who nodded to Vincent with clear recognition. 3rd floor, Vincent said, guiding me to an elevator that moved with whisper-quiet efficiency. Apartment 3C. It's been prepared for your arrival. The apartment was nothing like I'd expected. Not a cold safe house or temporary shelter, but an actual home. 1 bedroom with a view of the street below, a kitchen with appliances that looked new, a bathroom with a soaking tub, a living area furnished with comfortable furniture that showed signs of being actually lived in rather than staged. The refrigerator and pantry are stocked, Vincent explained, handing me a keycard identical to the one he'd used. Building has 24-hour security. No one gets up without being cleared, and your ex-boyfriend's photo has been distributed to all personnel with instructions to call police if he attempts entry. He paused. There's a phone on the kitchen counter. It's a secure line. Mr. Moretti's number is programmed as the first contact. You need anything before he arrives, you call that number. After Vincent left, I stood in the center of that beautiful apartment and tried to process what was happening. Less than 12 hours ago, I'd been collapsing in a diner, surviving on borrowed fries and desperation. Now I was in a space that represented more security and comfort than I'd known in years. The refrigerator revealed exactly what Vincent had promised. Fresh food, prepared meals in clear containers, everything I might need. I made coffee with beans that smelled expensive, carried the cup to the window, and watched Chicago wake up beneath me. My phone buzzed. Marcus, of course. Another barrage of messages that had shifted from threats back to apologies. Baby, please come home. I need you. I can't do this without you. Just tell me where you are. I'll come get you. We'll work this out together. I blocked his number with shaking hands, watched the screen confirm the action, and felt simultaneously liberated and terrified. That was it then. The bridge burned. No going back now, even if fear made me want to. Dante arrived at 2 p.m, looking exactly as he had at the diner, impeccably dressed, perfectly controlled, radiating the kind of authority that made people instinctively step aside. But up close, in the intimate space of the apartment, I noticed details I'd missed before. The faint scar through his left eyebrow, the silver just beginning at his temples. The way his dark eyes tracked across my face with the same careful attention he'd given the diner's layout, assessing, cataloging, missing nothing. You look better, he observed, settling onto the sofa with casual grace. Less like you might collapse at any moment. I ate breakfast, I said, remaining standing because sitting felt too intimate, too much like accepting the situation as normal. And slept without worrying about being woken by violence. It's amazing what 8 hours of uninterrupted rest can do. Vincent said you blocked your boyfriend's number. Not a question, but seeking confirmation. Ex-boyfriend, I corrected, testing the words. And yes, he was already cycling through the usual pattern. Threats, apologies, promises to change. I've heard it enough times to know how it ends. Dante nodded approvingly. Good. That's the first step. Cutting off his access. His ability to manipulate you back into his control. He pulled out a tablet from the briefcase he'd brought, tapping the screen a few times before turning it to face me. This is Marcus Webb, 28 years old, currently unemployed. History of assault charges that were dropped when victims declined to press charges. 3 ex-girlfriends willing to testify about similar patterns of abuse if it ever comes to that. I stared at the information he'd compiled in less than 24 hours. Police reports, employment records, even photographs of Marcus with other women I'd never known about. How did you get all this? I have resources, he said simply, and I use them to protect people I've decided are worth protecting. His gaze held mine. You're worth protecting, Maya. I want you to understand that before we go any further. Why? The question I'd asked last night, still searching for an answer that made sense. I'm nobody. A waitress who let herself get trapped by an abusive boyfriend. Why would someone like you care what happens to someone like me? Dante set the tablet aside, his expression shifting into something more vulnerable than I'd seen before. I told you about my mother. What I didn't tell you is that I was there when it happened. Heard the argument, heard him hitting her, and I was too young, too frightened to intervene. By the time I found the courage to call for help, she was already dead. His hands, resting on his knees, had tightened into fists. I was 17, and I swore that day that I would never stand by and let another woman suffer the way she suffered. That I would use every resource at my disposal to help women escape situations like yours. So yes, I care what happens to you, Maya Collins. Because you remind me of her, strong, resilient, surviving despite circumstances that should have broken you. The raw honesty in his confession made my throat tighten. I'm not strong, I whispered. Strong women leave. They don't stay for 2 years making excuses. Strong women survive, Dante corrected. And you've survived. Now I'm offering you the chance to do more than just survive. To actually live again. But I need you to trust me. I don't even know you. Then let me tell you who I am. He leaned back, his posture relaxed, but his attention completely focused. My family has been in Chicago for 4 generations. We own restaurants, real estate, import businesses. Some of our operations exist in gray areas that law enforcement prefers not to examine too closely. I won't lie about that. I'm not a Boy Scout, Maya, but I'm also not a monster. I have rules, lines I don't cross. And one of those lines is that I don't tolerate men who hurt women. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. He pulled out another document, sliding it across the coffee table toward me. This is a contract. It outlines what I'm offering and what I expect in return. Read it carefully before you agree to anything. I picked up the papers with trembling hands, scanning the legal language that had been simplified for clarity. The terms were straightforward. Dante would provide secure housing, financial support for basic needs, legal assistance in obtaining a restraining order against Marcus, and help finding new employment if I wanted it. In return, I was expected to attend counseling sessions, testify if legal proceedings required it, and accept protection protocols designed to keep me safe. This doesn't mention payment, I observed. How am I supposed to pay you back for all of this? You're not, Dante said simply. This isn't a loan, Maya. Consider it an investment in your future, or charity if that sits better with you. I don't need your money. I need you to focus on healing, on rebuilding your life, on becoming the woman you were before Marcus spent 2 years trying to destroy you. People don't just help strangers for nothing, I insisted. My cynicism born from years of learning that everything came with a price. There has to be something you want from me. Dante's expression shifted, something intense flashing across his features before control reasserted itself. What I want, he said carefully, is to see you safe, healthy, and thriving. If you're asking whether I have ulterior motives beyond that, the answer is complicated. He paused. I'm attracted to you, Maya. I'd be lying if I said otherwise. But that attraction doesn't come with expectations or conditions. You're under my protection because I've chosen to protect you, not because I expect anything in return." The honesty was disarming, made more so by the careful way he maintained distance between us. "What if I can't do this?" I asked quietly. "What if I'm too broken to be fixed?" "You're not broken," Dante said, his voice carrying absolute conviction. "You're bent, bruised, hurt by someone who should have cherished you. But not broken, Maya. And I'm going to prove that to you." Over the following week, Dante's promise began to take tangible form. He arranged for a therapist, Dr. Sarah Chen, who specialized in trauma and domestic violence, whose office was a 10-minute walk from the apartment. He handled the legal paperwork for the restraining order against Marcus, using lawyers who moved with intimidating efficiency through a system that usually ground slowly. Vincent became a constant but unobtrusive presence, appearing whenever I left the apartment to escort me to therapy or the grocery store, his professional demeanor gradually warming into something approaching friendship. He'd been with the Moretti family for 15 years, he told me during one walk, had seen Dante grow from an angry teenager into a man who wielded power with surprising restraint. "He's a good man," Vincent said, studying me with assessing eyes. "Better than his reputation suggests. The people he protects stay protected, Miss Collins. You're safe with him." I wanted to believe it. Wanted to trust that this wasn't some elaborate setup, that Dante's motives were as pure as he claimed. But trust had been beaten out of me along with so much else, and rebuilding it felt like learning to walk after a catastrophic injury. Painful, slow, requiring conscious effort with every step. Dr. Chen helped with that, her gentle questions gradually excavating the trauma I'd buried beneath survival instincts. She explained that abuse rewires the brain, creates neural pathways that expect danger and punishment, makes it difficult to accept genuine care without suspicion. Understanding the psychology didn't make it easier, but it helped me recognize when my reactions were based on past conditioning rather than present reality. "Dante is giving you space to heal without pressure," Dr. Chen observed during our second week of sessions. "That's significant. Many men would expect gratitude to translate into romantic or sexual availability. The fact that he's maintaining boundaries while providing support suggests his intentions are genuine. But those boundaries were tested the night Marcus found me. I'd been living in the apartment for 2 weeks, had started feeling almost safe in its elegant confines. Dante visited regularly, never intrusive, always respectful of my space, but present enough that I'd begun to anticipate his arrival each evening. We'd fall into easy conversation over the dinners he'd bring, talking about everything and nothing, carefully avoiding topics that felt too intimate. He was teaching me about his world in small doses, the legitimate businesses that formed the foundation of his empire, the careful network of loyalty and obligation that kept it running smoothly, even some of the gray area operations that existed on the edges of legality. Money laundering through cash businesses, protection services that bordered on extortion, strategic alliances with other families that required careful navigation. "I want you to understand who I am," he'd said. "All of it. Not just the parts that look good in daylight. If you're going to be under my protection, you deserve to know exactly what that means." I was making coffee after one of these dinners when the building's fire alarm began shrieking. Vincent appeared at my door within seconds, his expression grim. "It's not a fire," he said tersely. "Someone pulled the alarm. Marcus Webb was spotted in the area 10 minutes ago. We need to move you now." Everything happened with choreographed precision that suggested they'd planned for exactly this scenario. Vincent escorted me down the service stairs while speaking rapidly into his earpiece, coordinating with building security and what I assumed were other Moretti personnel. We emerged into the underground parking garage where a car waited, engine running. Dante himself was driving, the first time I'd seen him looking anything less than perfectly composed. His jaw was tight, his movement sharp with controlled anger as he guided me into the passenger seat. "He shouldn't have been able to find this location," Dante said as we pulled into traffic, his voice deadly calm. "Which means someone told him, or he's more resourceful than we anticipated. Either way, this ends tonight." "Where are we going?" I asked, trying to keep panic from my voice. "My personal residence. The penthouse at the Meridian Tower, 40 floors up, security that makes Fort Knox look accessible." His hand left the steering wheel briefly to cover mine where it was clenched in my lap. "I promise you, Maya, he won't get anywhere near you again." The Meridian Tower was everything its name suggested, Sleek, modern, expensive in ways that made my previous apartment look like a joke. The penthouse occupied the entire 40th floor, accessed by a private elevator that required both a keycard and biometric scan. The space was surprisingly warm despite its obvious luxury, floor-to-ceiling windows offering spectacular views of Chicago's skyline, but the furniture was comfortable rather than showy, books lining custom shelves, art that looked collected rather than purchased for investment. This was clearly where Dante actually lived, not just a showplace for business. "Guest suite is through there," he said, gesturing to a hallway. "Everything you need should be available. Rosa, my housekeeper, stocked it this afternoon when Vincent called ahead." "How long will I need to stay here?" I asked, feeling increasingly like a burden, like someone whose problems were consuming resources and attention I hadn't earned. "As long as it takes to ensure you're safe." Dante moved to the bar, poured himself 2 fingers of whiskey, then seemed to think better of drinking alone and poured a second glass, offering it to me. "I have people looking for Marcus now. When they find him, we'll have a conversation about boundaries and consequences." I took the glass with shaking hands, the amber liquid burning my throat when I sipped it. "What kind of conversation?" "The kind that ensures he understands that approaching you again would be the last mistake he ever makes." Dante's voice remained conversational, almost pleasant, which somehow made the threat more frightening. "I don't make idle warnings, Maya. When I tell someone they're under my protection, I mean it absolutely. Your ex-boyfriend is about to learn what that means." The whiskey helped, or perhaps it was just having Dante's solid presence nearby, but I felt some of the panic receding. "I don't want you to hurt him because of me," I said quietly. "I don't want to be responsible for violence." "You're not responsible for anything except surviving," Dante corrected, moving closer until he stood directly in front of me, close enough that I could smell his cologne. Something expensive and woodsy that made me think of old libraries and older money. "Marcus made choices. He chose to hurt you, chose to control you, chose to violate a restraining order and stalk you despite explicit warnings. The consequences of those choices are his to bear, not yours." His hand came up, fingers brushing gently along my jaw in a gesture that felt simultaneously protective and possessive. "I told you I don't tolerate men who hurt women. That wasn't theoretical, Maya. It's a line I enforce absolutely." I should have been frightened by the cold calculation in his voice, by the casual way he discussed consequences that probably involved serious violence. Instead, I felt a savage satisfaction that someone finally was treating Marcus's abuse as the serious crime it was, that someone powerful enough to actually do something about it was choosing to act. "Thank you," I whispered, the words inadequate for what he was offering. "Don't thank me yet," Dante said, his thumb tracing my cheekbone with exquisite gentleness. "Thank me when this is over, and you're finally free." Marcus was found 3 hours later in a bar on the south side, drunk and telling anyone who'd listen about his crazy ex-girlfriend who'd run off with some mobster. Vincent's team picked him up with efficiency that suggested this wasn't their first extraction, and Dante left the penthouse around midnight with instructions for me to lock the door behind him and not open it for anyone except him or Vincent. I waited in that beautiful space, pacing between the windows and the couch, trying not to imagine what was happening wherever they'd taken Marcus. Dr. Chen had warned me about this, the complicated emotions that came with someone else enacting the revenge I'd fantasized about, but never had the power to pursue. Guilt mixed with satisfaction, fear mixed with hope. The disturbing realization that part of me wanted Marcus to suffer the way he'd made me suffer. Dante returned at 3 a.m, his knuckles slightly bruised, his expression grim but satisfied. He found me curled on the couch, unable to sleep, and settled beside me with careful distance. "It's handled," he said simply. "Marcus Webb has been convinced that remaining in Chicago would be detrimental to his health. He's leaving for Arizona tomorrow morning, has family there who might actually help him get sober. If he's smart, he'll stay there and build a new life. If he's stupid enough to return, the consequences will be significantly more severe." "Did you hurt him?" I asked, needing to know. "I explained the situation in terms he could understand," Dante replied, which wasn't really an answer. "Let's just say he now has a very clear picture of what happens to men who stalk women under my protection. And he's aware that if he ever contacts you again, calls, texts, shows up anywhere near you, he won't get another warning." I should have felt relief, or perhaps horror at what had been done in my name. Instead, I felt something crack open in my chest. Some barrier I'd built between myself and genuine feeling. some wall that had kept me safe by keeping me numb. Tears came suddenly, violently. 2 years of suppressed emotion flooding out in ugly sobs that shook my entire body. Dante pulled me against his chest without hesitation, one hand cradling the back of my head while the other rubbed soothing circles on my back. He didn't tell me to stop crying, didn't try to shush me or minimize what I was feeling. He just held me, solid and warm and safe, while I fell apart in the way I'd needed to for months. "You're safe now," he murmured into my hair, his lips brushing my temple. "I've got you, Maya. You're safe." I cried until exhaustion replaced emotion, until my body simply ran out of the energy required for tears. Dante carried me to the guest suite, lifted me like I weighed nothing, settled me onto the bed with careful gentleness, removed my shoes, and pulled a blanket over me. "Sleep," he said softly. "Tomorrow we'll start planning what comes next. But tonight, just rest." I caught his hand before he could leave, my fingers wrapping around his wrist. "Stay," I whispered. "Please. I don't want to be alone." Something shifted in his expression, surprise maybe, or concern about boundaries we've been carefully maintaining. "Maya, I don't think— Just stay," I interrupted. "You don't have to. I'm not asking for anything except your presence. I just need to know someone's here, that I'm not alone." He settled onto the bed beside me, still fully dressed, maintaining careful distance but close enough that I could feel his warmth. His hand found mine in the darkness, fingers lacing together. "I'm here," he said quietly. "You're not alone anymore, Kara. I promise you that." I fell asleep holding his hand, and for the first time since I could remember, I didn't dream of violence. Morning arrived with winter sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows I'd forgotten to close. For several disoriented seconds, I couldn't remember where I was. The bed too soft, the room too large, the absence of fear too profound. Then memory returned in a gentle wave, rather than the usual crash of anxiety. Dante's penthouse. Marcus gone. Safety that felt almost real. I was alone in the bed, though the indentation in the pillow beside mine suggested Dante had stayed longer than just until I'd fallen asleep. The scent of his cologne lingered faintly on the sheets, and something warm unfurled in my chest at the evidence of his care. He'd held me while I cried, stayed when I'd asked him to, and left before morning to preserve my dignity and his boundaries. The smell of coffee drew me from the guest suite into the main living area, where I found Dante in the kitchen, dressed casually in dark slacks and a white button-down with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. He looked different in the morning light, softer somehow, more approachable, though the underlying authority remained constant. "Coffee's fresh," he said, glancing up with a slight smile. "I wasn't sure how you'd take it, so there's cream and sugar on the counter." "Black is fine," I said, accepting the mug he poured. The warmth seeped into my palms, grounding me in the present moment. "Thank you for last night, for staying. You don't need to thank me for basic human decency, Maya." He leaned against the counter, his own coffee forgotten as he studied my face with that unsettling attention that missed nothing. "How are you feeling this morning?" I considered the question carefully, taking inventory of my emotional state the way Dr. Chen had taught me. "Lighter," I said finally. "Like something I've been carrying for 2 years finally got set down. Is that strange?" "Not at all." Dante's expression softened with understanding. "You've been living in survival mode, constantly vigilant, always calculating danger. Now that the immediate threat is neutralized, your nervous system can finally start to relax. It's going to take time for your body to catch up with your mind, to truly believe you're safe. But this is the first step." We stood in comfortable silence, drinking coffee while Chicago woke up 40 stories below. It felt surreally domestic, sharing breakfast with a man who'd orchestrated my rescue, who'd threatened violence on my behalf, who'd held me while I'd fallen apart and asked for nothing in return. "What happens now?" I asked eventually, setting down my empty mug. "Marcus is leaving, I can't go back to the apartment I shared with him, and I can't stay here indefinitely imposing on your hospitality." "Why not?" Dante's question was genuinely curious rather than rhetorical. "This penthouse has more space than I need. The guest suite is yours for as long as you want it. There's no imposition, Maya." "Because I can't build a life in someone else's space," I said, the words coming from some deep place of self-preservation. I need to figure out who I am outside of Marcus's control, and I can't do that while depending completely on your protection and resources. I need to stand on my own feet, even if they're still shaky. Something flickered across Dante's face. Respect, maybe, or understanding, possibly even approval. I can appreciate that. Independence is important, especially after someone spent 2 years systematically stripping yours away. He set down his own mug with deliberate care. But I have a proposition that might satisfy both needs, yours for autonomy and mine for ensuring your safety. I waited, curious despite my wariness about accepting more help. I own a building in Lincoln Park, Dante continued. Residential units, all occupied except for one on the 3rd floor that I've been using for storage. It's not large. 1 bedroom, modest kitchen, nothing fancy, but it's secure, in a good neighborhood, and the rent would be whatever you can afford once you're working again. He paused, watching my reaction. You'd have your own space, your own life, but with the security of knowing the building has proper protection, and I'm close enough to respond if needed. That's too generous, I protested automatically, even as part of me ached to accept. You've already done so much. I can't keep taking from you without giving anything back. You're not taking, Maya. I'm offering. Dante moved closer, stopping just at the edge of my personal space, close enough that I had to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact. And if you're worried about owing me something, consider this. I need good people in my life. People who are loyal, honest, who understand that kindness isn't weakness. You've already proven you're all those things by surviving what you survived without becoming bitter or cruel. That's valuable to me in ways that have nothing to do with money or obligation. His hand came up, fingers brushing a strand of hair back from my face with careful gentleness. Let me help you rebuild, Kara. Not because you owe me, but because I want to see what you become when you're not just surviving anymore. The Italian endearment, Kara, meaning dear or beloved, sent warmth spiraling through me. Dr. Chen had warned about this, about the danger of transferring dependence from one man to another, about confusing gratitude with genuine emotion. But what I felt when Dante looked at me wasn't the desperate clinging I'd experienced with Marcus. It was something quieter, more grounded. Appreciation mixed with attraction, safety mixed with possibility. Okay, I said quietly. I'll accept the apartment, but I pay rent as soon as I'm working, even if it's small at first. And I want to contribute somehow. I can't just be a charity case indefinitely. Dante's smile was genuine, transforming his usually guarded features. Deal. Now, let's talk about employment. Rosie called this morning. Apparently you're her best waitress, and she's fielding questions from regular customers about when you're coming back. But I also have opportunities available if you want something different. Several of my restaurants need floor managers, or if you're interested in learning the business side, I could use someone with your attention to detail in operations. The fact that Rosie had called him, that she was worried about me, made my throat tighten with unexpected emotion. I should call her, I said. Let her know I'm okay. She knows you're safe. I made sure of that. Dante pulled out his phone, scrolled briefly, then showed me a text exchange from earlier that morning. Rosie's messages were characteristically blunt. That girl better be okay, or you and me are going to have words. She's special. Dante's response had been simple. She's safe and under my protection. I'll take care of her. She cares about you, Dante observed. Threatened to come after me personally if I didn't treat you well. Despite everything, I laughed. A genuine sound that surprised us both. That's Rosie. She's looked out for me since I started at the diner. Probably knew about Marcus before I admitted it to myself. Smart woman. Dante pocketed his phone. So what do you want to do? Return to waitressing where you're comfortable, or try something new? I thought about it while we finished breakfast. Eggs and toast that Dante made with surprising competence. Conversation flowing easily as we ate. The diner had been my refuge for 3 years, the one place where I'd felt competent and valued despite everything falling apart at home. But it also represented a version of myself that had accepted abuse, that had smiled through split lips and served coffee with bruised hands. Something new, I decided finally. I love Rosie and the diner, but I think I need a fresh start. If you're serious about the restaurant management position, I'd like to try that. I'm always serious about business, Dante said. And I think you'd be excellent at it. You already understand customer service, have experience managing difficult personalities, and possess the kind of organizational skills that translate well to operations. We'll start you as an assistant manager at Lucia's, one of my Italian restaurants in River North. See how you like it, and if it's a good fit, we'll discuss advancement. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of transition that felt simultaneously overwhelming and exhilarating. Dante kept his promise about the Lincoln Park apartment, a cozy space on the 3rd floor of a well-maintained building with hardwood floors, large windows that let in natural light, and a kitchen that was small but functional. Rosa helped me furnish it with items from storage and strategic shopping trips that felt like friendship rather than charity. Mr. Moretti is very particular about who he protects, Rosa confided during one of these trips, examining throw pillows with the serious attention most people reserved for major purchases. In 15 years, I've seen him help maybe half a dozen people this thoroughly. You must be special. I'm nobody special, I protested automatically. Just someone who needed help at the right time. Rosa's knowing smile suggested she didn't believe me, but she let the topic drop in favor of debating whether my living room needed curtains or could survive with just blinds. The job at Lucia's started simply, shadowing the current manager, learning systems, understanding how Dante's restaurants operated with a smooth efficiency that suggested years of refinement. The staff was professional, the food exceptional, and the clientele ranged from legitimate business people to individuals whose expensive suits couldn't quite hide the edge of danger they carried. Some of our customers have connections to families like ours, Dante explained during one of his regular check-ins at the restaurant. They expect discretion, excellent service, and the understanding that certain conversations are never overheard or repeated. Can you handle that? I served coffee to truckers discussing smuggling routes and cops planning off-duty security jobs, I said. I know how to not hear things that aren't my business. His approving smile made something warm bloom in my chest. I saw Dante regularly, too regularly for someone who was supposed to be building independent life, but I found myself looking forward to his visits with an anticipation that went beyond gratitude. He'd stop by the restaurant during my shifts, ostensibly to check on business but lingering to talk, to ask about my day, to share stories about his own work that gradually painted a picture of a man far more complex than his reputation suggested. He told me about growing up in the shadow of family expectations, about the weight of inheriting an empire built on both legitimate business and carefully maintained gray areas, about the responsibility he felt toward the people who depended on him, employees, associates, the extended network of loyalty that kept his organization running smoothly. People think power means doing whatever you want, he said one evening over dinner at Lucia's after closing, the restaurant empty except for us and the night cleaning crew. But real power is responsibility. Every decision I make affects hundreds of people, their livelihoods, their families, their futures. That's not freedom, Maya. That's obligation. Do you resent it? I asked, studying his face in the soft lighting. The obligation? Sometimes, he admitted. When I was younger, definitely. I wanted to be normal, to have choices that weren't predetermined by family legacy, but I've grown into it, learned to find satisfaction in using power responsibly rather than resenting having it at all. His dark eyes held mine across the table. And recently, I've discovered that having resources means being able to help people who need it. That feels worthwhile in ways making money never did. The intensity in his gaze made it clear he was talking about me, about my rescue, about the satisfaction he'd found in using his power to protect rather than simply control. Heat crept up my neck despite the restaurant's air conditioning. I never properly thanked you, I said quietly. For everything. The apartment, the job, getting rid of Marcus. You've given me my life back, Dante. You gave yourself your life back by calling me, he corrected. I just provided resources and opportunity. The courage to use them came from you, Kara. There was that endearment again, dropping into conversation like a promise or a question. We'd been carefully maintaining boundaries, professional distance despite growing friendship, physical space despite increasing attraction. But something was shifting between us. Had been shifting since that night he'd held me while I cried, since I'd woken in his penthouse feeling safe for the first time in years. Can I ask you something personal? I ventured, emboldened by wine and privacy and the way he was looking at me. Anything. Why haven't you dated anyone? Rosa mentioned you've been single for years, that you're particular about who you let close. Is it because of your mother? Because of what happened to her? Dante was quiet for a long moment, his fingers tracing patterns on the stem of his wineglass. Partially, he said finally. Watching someone I loved die because of violence connected to my family made me cautious about bringing anyone into this world. The danger is real, Maya. Enemies exist. Rivalries flare up, and people close to me become targets. He paused, his gaze lifting to meet mine with uncomfortable intensity. But it's also because I haven't met anyone who made the risk feel worthwhile. Until recently. My breath caught at the implication, at the way he was looking at me like I was something precious and dangerous simultaneously. Dante. I know, he interrupted gently. You're still healing. Still figuring out who you are outside of trauma and survival. I'm not pushing, Maya. I'm just being honest about what I feel, because I think you deserve honesty from me. What do you feel? The question emerged barely above a whisper. That you're extraordinary, he said simply. That watching you rebuild yourself has been the most beautiful thing I've witnessed in years. That I want to be part of your life in whatever capacity you're comfortable with. Friend, protector, or something more if you ever decide you want that. The confession hung between us, weighted with possibility and patience. Dr. Chen had warned me about this too, about the danger of rushing into new relationships before fully processing old trauma, about the importance of understanding my own desires separate from gratitude or fear of abandonment. But looking at Dante across that table, seeing genuine caring in his expression rather than the possessive obsession that had characterized Marcus's love, I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't fear or desperation or the need to be saved. This was choice, maybe for the first time in years. The choice to want someone who'd proven he could be trusted with that wanting. I don't know if I'm ready, I admitted. I'm still having nightmares sometimes. Still jumping at loud noises, still working through years of conditioning that taught me love meant pain. I know, Dante said. And I'm willing to wait while you figure it out. There's no timeline, Kara. No pressure. Just possibility when and if you want it. We left it there that night. Possibility acknowledged but unexplored. Attraction admitted but not acted upon. But something had changed in the space between us. Some invisible barrier lowered, making way for whatever might come next. 3 months after Marcus left Chicago, I woke in my Lincoln Park apartment to spring sunlight and the realization that I'd slept through the entire night without nightmares. It was a small victory, but Dr. Chen had taught me to celebrate small victories, to recognize progress even when it felt incremental. I'd been promoted to full manager at Lucia's, had built friendships with staff who knew nothing about my history beyond what I chose to share, had started saving money in an account that only I could access. My apartment had transformed from sparse functionality into an actual home, filled with things I'd chosen because I liked them rather than because they were practical or cheap. And Dante had become a constant in my life, not overwhelming or controlling, but present. He stopped by the restaurant regularly, took me to dinner once a week at places I'd never have accessed on my own, introduced me to parts of Chicago I'd only read about. We talked for hours about everything and nothing, and slowly, carefully, I'd begun to trust that his interest wasn't a trap. You're different, Dr. Chen observed during one of our weekly sessions. More present, more confident. Whatever you're doing, it's working. I have my own space, I said. My own job, my own money, my own life. For the first time since I was 24, I'm not defining myself by someone else's needs or expectations. And Dante Moretti? Dr. Chen asked with the directness I'd come to appreciate. How does he fit into this new life? I thought about it carefully before answering. He's my friend. And maybe something more, eventually, if I can trust myself to want that for the right reasons, rather than just gratitude or fear of being alone. Do you think you're ready to explore that possibility? Was I ready? I examined the question from multiple angles, testing it for weak spots the way I'd learned to test everything after Marcus. Dante had proven himself patient, had given me space to heal while remaining available, had shown me through consistent action that protection didn't require possession, that caring didn't demand surrender of autonomy. I think so, I said slowly. I think I'm ready to stop hiding from possibility because I'm afraid of being hurt again. That evening, I texted Dante with shaking hands. Can you come over tonight? I want to talk about something. His response came within minutes. I'll bring dinner. 7 p.m.? I I spent the intervening hours alternating between confidence and panic, second-guessing my decision, rehearsing conversations that sounded ridiculous out loud. By the time Dante arrived with Thai food from my favorite restaurant, of course he'd remembered, I was nearly vibrating with nervous energy. "You look terrified," he observed, setting the food on my small dining table. "Should I be worried?" "No. Maybe. I don't know." I forced myself to breathe slowly, to access the courage that had gotten me this far. "I wanted to talk about us, about what you said 3 months ago, about wanting something more." Dante went very still, his dark eyes tracking across my face with that careful attention. "Okay, I'm listening." "I'm not broken anymore," I said, the words coming in a rush. "Or at least, I'm healing. I'm rebuilding. I'm becoming someone I actually recognize and like. And part of that process has been figuring out what I want independent of fear or obligation or gratitude." "And what do you want, Maya?" His voice was carefully neutral, but I saw tension in the way he held himself, hope and caution warring in his expression. "You," I said simply. "I want to explore this thing between us. Not because you saved me, or because I owe you, or because I'm afraid to be alone, but because I genuinely enjoy your company. Because you make me laugh and challenge me to grow and look at me like I'm someone worth knowing, rather than just someone worth saving." The smile that spread across Dante's face was radiant, transforming his usually controlled features into something boyish and genuine. "You're sure? Because once we cross this line, Maya, I won't want to go back. I've been patient, but that patience came from restraint, not lack of interest. If you let me in, I'm going to want all of you. Your time, your trust, your heart, if you're willing to give it." "I'm sure," I said, surprised by how true it was. "And maybe a little terrified, but the good kind of terrified. The kind that means something matters enough to risk it." Dante crossed the small space between us in 2 strides, his hands framing my face with exquisite gentleness. "I'm going to kiss you now," he said, giving me time to refuse, to pull away, to change my mind. Instead, I rose on my toes and closed the distance myself, pressing my lips to his with all the hope and fear and possibility tangled together in my chest. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, both of us testing this new territory. Then Dante's arms wrapped around me, pulling me against his solid warmth, and I felt something in me finally, completely relax. This was nothing like Marcus's brutal claiming, nothing like the kisses that had preceded violence and control. This was careful and heated simultaneously, Dante's obvious desire tempered by remarkable restraint, his hands steady on my waist while mine fisted in his shirt, anchoring myself to this moment, this choice, this man who'd proven he could be trusted with my vulnerability. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dante rested his forehead against mine. "I've wanted to do that for months," he admitted, his voice rough. "Watching you heal, watching you grow stronger, has been the most beautiful and frustrating experience of my life." I laughed, the sound emerging naturally, freely, without the careful calculation that had characterized my laughter for years. "We should probably eat before the food gets cold." "Practical as always," Dante teased, but he released me with obvious reluctance, his hand finding mine and lacing our fingers together as we moved to the table. We ate Thai food and talked about logistics, what a relationship between us would look like, how to maintain healthy boundaries while exploring connection, his concerns about danger, and my insistence that I understood and accepted the risks that came with being close to him. "I won't lie about my world," Dante said seriously. "There are threats, rivalries, situations that could become dangerous. But I protect what's mine, Maya, and if you agree to be mine, that protection becomes absolute. No one touches you without answering to me and everything I control." The possessiveness in his voice should have triggered warning bells after Marcus's controlling behavior, but I'd learned to recognize the difference between protection and control, between a man who valued my autonomy and one who wanted to erase it. Dante had spent months proving he could be trusted with power, that his strength could shelter rather than crush. "Then I'm yours," I said simply. "And you're mine. That's how this works, right? Partnership, not possession?" "Exactly that," Dante agreed, his smile fierce and proud. "Partnership." The following months unfolded with surprising ease. Dante and I navigated the early stages of our relationship with the care of people who'd both been damaged by love and were determined not to repeat old patterns. We went slowly, Dinners and movies and long walks through Chicago, gradually building intimacy through shared experiences rather than rushing into physical connection. When we finally made love, it was 4 months into our relationship, in my apartment on a spring evening with windows open to let in the night air. Dante touched me like I was precious, like my pleasure mattered more than his own, and I discovered that intimacy didn't have to mean pain or obligation or fear. It could be joyful, mutual, a celebration rather than a transaction. "I love you," I said afterward, the words emerging with startling ease as we lay tangled together in my bed. I didn't think I'd be able to say that again after Marcus, but I do. "I love you, Dante Moretti." His arms tightened around me, his lips pressing against my temple. "I've loved you since you collapsed in that diner and trusted me enough to let me catch you. Since you showed me that strength isn't about never falling, it's about getting back up and choosing to keep fighting." A year after Marcus left Chicago, Rosie threw me a party at the diner, a celebration of my 1-year anniversary of freedom, as she called it, though it felt more like a celebration of survival and growth and the life I'd built from ruins. The entire staff from Lucia's attended, along with Rosa and Vincent, and even some of Dante's business associates who'd become unexpectedly fond of me. Dante gave a toast that made me cry, talking about resilience and beauty and the privilege of watching someone transform from survivor to someone truly thriving. Rosie hugged me so hard I could barely breathe, whispering that she'd known I was special from the first day I'd walked into her diner, that she'd prayed I'd find the strength to leave. "You're not the same girl who used to hide bruises under long sleeves," she said, her weathered face creased with satisfaction. "You're fierce now. Confident. That's what love is supposed to do. Build you up, not tear you down." Standing in that diner surrounded by people who genuinely cared about me, Dante's hand warm in mine, I felt the final piece of Marcus's legacy crumble into dust. I wasn't his victim anymore, wasn't defined by what he'd done to me or how I'd survived it. I was simply Maya Collins, restaurant manager, girlfriend to Chicago's most dangerous and surprisingly gentle man, survivor who'd become someone truly living. 2 years after that first phone call to Dante's number, we stood in his penthouse overlooking Chicago's glittering skyline. He'd brought me up here after a dinner at Lucia's, said he wanted to ask me something important in a place that felt significant to our story. "You've rebuilt your entire life," Dante said, pulling me close against his chest, his arms wrapped around me from behind as we looked out at the city. "You're thriving at work, healthy, confident, everything I hoped you'd become when I first offered to help." "Everything I am is because you gave me the space and resources to remember who I was beneath the fear," I corrected. "You saved my life, Dante. Literally and figuratively." "You saved yourself," he insisted. "I just provided opportunity. The courage to use it came from you." He turned me to face him, his dark eyes intense with emotion. "Which is why I want to ask you to build the rest of your life with me. Officially, permanently, with rings and promises and everything that comes with it." He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket, opening it to reveal a ring that took my breath away. A simple emerald surrounded by diamonds, elegant and understated, perfect for someone who'd learned to value substance over show. "Marry me, Maya Collins," Dante said, his voice steady despite the vulnerability in his eyes. "Let me spend the rest of my life proving that love doesn't have to hurt, that strength and gentleness can coexist, that you deserve all the happiness you can hold." I thought about the woman I'd been 2 years ago, exhausted, terrified, convinced she deserved the abuse she was receiving. I thought about the journey from that diner to this penthouse, from survival to thriving, from accepting scraps to claiming joy. I thought about Dante's patience, his protection that never became possession, his love that had helped me heal without demanding anything in return. "Yes," I said, the word emerging clear and certain. "Yes to everything." He slipped the ring onto my finger, and then he was kissing me with all the passion he'd been carefully restraining, his hands tangling in my hair, my arms wrapping around his neck. We stayed like that for a long time, 40 stories above Chicago, celebrating possibility and promise and the future we'd build together. The wedding 6 months later was small, just close friends and the family we'd chosen rather than been born into. Rosie cried through the entire ceremony. Rosa served as my maid of honor, her weathered face soft with satisfaction. Vincent walked me down the aisle since I had no father left to do it, his usually stoic expression cracking into genuine smile when he placed my hand in Dante's. Take care of her, Vincent said, the traditional words carrying weight of real threat. Or answer to me. Always, Dante promised, his eyes never leaving mine. I'll always take care of her. And he did. Through the nightmares that still occasionally surfaced, through the therapy sessions I continued because healing was ongoing rather than finite, through moments when old fears tried to resurface and convince me this happiness couldn't be real. Dante remained steady, patient, proving day after day that love could be safe, that I could be cherished rather than controlled, that my past didn't have to define my future. 3 years after I'd collapsed in his arms at Rosie's diner, I stood in the nursery of our new house, a beautiful space in Lincoln Park, close to my apartment building but larger, suitable for the family we were building. Dante's hand rested on my swollen belly, feeling our daughter kick with the fierce energy that suggested she'd inherited her father's strength. What should we name her? I asked, leaning back against his chest. Something strong, Dante said, his lips brushing my temple. Something that reflects who she'll become. Fierce, independent, loved absolutely. Maya, I suggested with a small smile. After her mother who survived impossible things. No. Dante turned me to face him, his hands framing my face with familiar gentleness. Name her something forward-looking. You're not defined by survival anymore, Kara. You're defined by joy, success, love, all the things you've built from the ruins. Our daughters should carry that legacy, not the old pain. He was right, I realized. I'd spent so long defining myself by what I'd survived that I'd forgotten to celebrate what I'd become. I wasn't Marcus's victim or even Dante's rescued damsel. I was Maya Moretti, restaurant owner now, having purchased Lucia's from Dante as a combination wedding gift and business investment. Wife to a complicated man who'd proven love could be gentle, mother to a daughter who would grow up knowing that strength and softness weren't opposites, but companions. Hope, I said finally. We'll name her Hope, because that's what you gave me when I'd lost it completely. Dante's smile was radiant, his hands splaying across my belly protectively. Hope Moretti. Perfect. Standing in that nursery with Dante's arms around me and our daughter moving beneath his palm, I thought about the scared woman who'd once hidden bruises under makeup and convinced herself she deserved punishment. She felt like someone else now, a distant memory of who I'd been before I'd learned to fight for my own happiness. Marcus had tried to break me, had spent 2 years systematically destroying my sense of self-worth and autonomy, but he'd failed. I'd survived, escaped, rebuilt myself into someone stronger and more authentic than I'd been before he'd touched my life. And Dante, dangerous, powerful Dante Moretti, who commanded an empire and inspired fear in grown men, had looked at my brokenness and seen beauty, had offered protection without demanding possession, had given me space to heal without abandoning me to do it alone, had loved me with a patience and gentleness that proved not all strong men were violent. My phone buzzed with a text from Rosie. Dinner Sunday? Want to see how big that baby's gotten? And bring your handsome husband. He still owes me for the wedding cake. I smiled, typing back confirmation while Dante read over my shoulder and laughed. This was my life now. Not perfect. I still had nightmares sometimes, still jumped at loud noises, still carried scars both visible and hidden. But it was mine, built on choices I'd made for myself, filled with people who loved me without demanding I be anything other than exactly who I was. What are you thinking about? Dante asked, his arms tightening around me. That I'm happy, I said simply. For the first time in years, I'm genuinely, completely happy. Good, he murmured into my hair. You deserve happiness, Kara. You've always deserved it. And standing in that nursery with Chicago's evening light streaming through the windows and our daughter moving beneath our joined hands, I finally, completely believed him. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.